The market was chaos. Vendors shouted. Children ran between baskets of cassava root and cloth stalls weighted down with indigo and crimson. The sun beat down like a drum on the heads of 1,000 people gathered in the settlement of Kibwe, and the air smelled of sweat, fish drying on racks, and the sharp green scent of fresh yam leaves bundled for sale. Nandi pushed through the crowd, her new wrapper bright as sunrise, her head held high. The wrapper was indigo with gold thread woven through it. Expensive cloth that showed status. Her head wrap matched, tied in the style of a married woman, the knot sitting high and proud at the crown of her head. She had been married only 2 moons to Kofi, a trader, a man of importance, a man who traveled to the city and returned with goods that made other men jealous. For the first time in her life, she carried silver in her palm. Real silver. Coins that made a sound when they moved in the fold of her cloth. She had come to the market to buy beads, the finest beads she could find. Blue ones, like the ones her mother had owned. The beads that Nandi had sold when her family fell into poverty. The beads that she had always meant to buy back. Now she could. Now she was the kind of woman who bought fine things. An old woman stood directly in her path, blind. Her eyes were clouded like water after rain. The pupils disappeared into milky white. Her skin hung loose on her bones like cloth on a drying stick. She wore a wrapper so faded it was colorless. Once it might have been white or cream, but now it was the color of dust and age. Her hair was wrapped in a cloth of rough fibers, yellowed with time. She held out a trembling hand, her fingers thin as twigs. "Water," the old woman whispered. Her voice was rough like grinding stones. "Just a calabash of water, daughter. The sun is very hot. Just water." Nandi looked at her, this creature blocking her way, this interruption in the middle of her important errand, this nothing, and something cold moved through her chest. The contempt came so quickly it surprised even herself. Did she look like a water carrier? Did she look like a servant? Did she look like someone who spent her days hauling water from the river? She had money now. She had a husband. She had status. She wore cloth with gold thread. And this woman, this ancient thing, was reaching out to touch her wrapper with her dirty fingers. The old woman's hand touched Nandi's cloth. Just barely. Just the tips of her fingers, dry as papyrus, brushing against the fabric. Something in Nandi's mind snapped like a baobab branch in the Harmattan wind. She raised her hand and struck the old woman across her blind face. Not a slap. A full strike, using the heel of her palm, putting the weight of her body into it. The blow was so hard it made a sound like a branch breaking against stone. The old woman made a noise. Not quite a scream, more like something being pushed out of her, and her body twisted backward. She fell hard into a pile of yam baskets, her body crumpling between them, her hand flying open, the edge of it striking a clay pot that shattered into pieces. The market stopped. Vendors fell silent mid-word. Customers froze where they stood. Women gathering at the cloth stall turned slowly. Men stopped their negotiations. Children who had been running stopped running and stared. The entire marketplace held its breath. Nandi looked down at the old woman lying in the dust. A small line of blood came from the corner of the old woman's mouth. Her blind eyes did not focus on anything. Her body was still, except for her breathing. Nandi turned around and walked forward without looking back. She walked with her chin high. She walked as if what she had done was nothing, as if striking a blind old woman in the middle of the market was something that happened every day, as if she was still important, as if she still mattered. She had taken 3 steps when she felt it. A burning in her right palm, sharp, immediate. It felt like she had plunged her hand into fire. She looked down and stopped walking. Her right hand, the hand that had struck the old woman, was changing. The skin was hardening, not into something smooth like callus, into something rough and dead, like the bark of the baobab tree, like wood that had been exposed to the sun for many seasons. She could not feel her fingers anymore. They were becoming thick and swollen, the color draining from them, replaced by a gray-brown that seemed to come from deep inside her skin. The nails hardened and turned the color of old mahogany. The flesh itself seemed to be replacing itself with something else, something that was not alive, something that was not her. Nandi opened her mouth to scream, but fear choked the sound. She stared at her hand as though it belonged to someone else. The transformation was spreading. Already it had moved past her wrist, up toward her forearm. She could see the line where the transformation ended, a clear demarcation between human flesh and wood. The wood was warm still, warm enough that she knew it was still happening, still alive in the way that wood could be alive, but she could not feel it. Below the wrist, her hand was completely numb. She could see it moving, but there was no sensation. It was like watching someone else's limb attached to her body. Behind her, somewhere in the market, she heard the old woman breathing in the dust, shallow breaths, rattling breaths. Nandi ran through the village. She ran from the market toward the compound she shared with Kofi, her legs moving so fast she stumbled twice. Her hand, her wooden hand, bounced at her side. It did not hurt anymore. That was what frightened her most. It did not hurt. It simply was not there. It was attached to her body, but it was not part of her anymore. She found Kofi in the courtyard of the compound, sitting on a carved wooden stool, discussing cloth with a merchant from the next village over. The merchant was showing him bolts of fabric in shades of red and orange. Kofi looked like a man at peace, a man who was satisfied with his station in life. "Look," Nandi gasped, holding out her hand. She did not speak. Words seemed impossible. She simply held out the transformed limb so that Kofi could see. Kofi's face changed. The merchant faded into the background like smoke. Kofi stood and grabbed his wife's hand. It was hard. The wood had spread even further, past her elbow now, traveling toward her shoulder. It was warm to his touch, almost hot, and when he pressed his fingers against it, they made no mark. It was becoming material, becoming thing, becoming something that was not his wife. "What happened?" Kofi's voice was sharp, afraid. "How did you do this? What kind of magic is this?" I struck someone. In the market. A woman. But I did not know. I did not understand what would happen." Kofi's face went pale. He released her hand as if it had burned him. "Who did you strike?" Nandi could not say. She could not speak her own shame aloud. To say the name would be to make it real, to make it permanent. Kofi took her to the healer. The healer was an old man named Sibo, with white hair that fell past his shoulders and eyes that seemed to see not just what was present, but what was hidden. His compound was on the edge of the village, surrounded by plants that Nandi did not recognize. Some hung from the roof of his hut, drying. Some grew in clay pots arranged in patterns that seemed meaningful, but made no sense to her. The air smelled of bark and roots, and things that had been boiled in water until they released their essence. Sibo examined her hand for a long time. He did not speak while he examined it. He simply held it, turning it in the light, touching the grain of the wood with fingers that seemed to know wood in a way that went deeper than touch. He pressed his ear against it as if listening for a heartbeat. He smelled it, bringing his nose close, inhaling deeply. His expression was difficult to read. It contained pity, but also knowledge. It contained something like recognition. "How long since this began?" he asked finally. "Since this morning, in the market. It was only my hand when I left. Now it has spread this far." Sibo nodded as if she had confirmed something he already knew. "How far did the wood spread when you last looked at it closely?" he asked. "To my elbow when I arrived at Kofi's compound. Now it is past my shoulder. The spreading does not stop. I cannot stop it. I cannot feel anything above my wrist." Sibo mixed herbs. He crushed them in a mortar made of stone, releasing smells that made Nandi's eyes water. He created poultices of mud and crushed leaves and something that looked like fat. He wrapped her arm with cloth soaked in medicines made from roots and bark and oils that glinted like liquid gold. He chanted words in a language that Nandi did not understand. The language of ancestors, perhaps, or of spirits. He burned offerings at his shrine, watching the smoke curl upward. He consulted texts written on cloth so old that the writing was almost invisible. Nothing worked. The wood continued its slow climb toward her heart. It was beautiful in a terrible way, the color of old mahogany, with grain patterns like the rings of ancient trees. If Nandi had not known what it was, if she had not been able to feel, or rather not feel, what it was doing to her body, she might have thought it was beautiful. By the third day, it had reached her collarbone. The line of demarcation had moved to her neck. Nandi could not lower her right shoulder. She could not turn her head to the right. The wooden side of her body was becoming statue-like. At the market, the story was already changing, mutating from truth into legend. Vendors had different versions depending on who they were telling. Some said a woman had slapped a trader who had refused to pay for cloth. Some said a woman had slapped an old man who had tried to steal from her. Some said a woman had slapped a girl who had bumped into her in the crowd. The details shifted like sand in wind, but one detail remained constant, spoken in every version with a certainty that approached mystical knowledge. A woman's hand was turning to wood. The spirits had marked her. The spirits were punishing her. Everyone in the village knew the truth, though not everyone said the old woman's blind woman's name. Some people did not speak her name because they had forgotten it. Some because they had never known it. Some because they were afraid. The women at the river spoke of it while gathering water. Nandi's name had become a kind of currency among them. They traded it back and forth like silver coins. It was an act of cruelty, one woman said, wringing cloth against the rocks, the water turning brown with the dirt of the village. She was a woman with strong shoulders, a woman who had borne many children. Pure disrespect. The spirits do not forgive such things. I have heard stories. My grandmother told me of a man who struck his mother. His arm fell off within a week, not turned to wood, just fell off, gone. He bled to death in the village square. Another woman nodded, crushing cloth between her hands. She was younger, with many bracelets on her wrists that caught the light. She thought her husband's money had made her better. Better than an old woman in the market, better than the village, better than the earth itself. The spirits remember that kind of pride. They mark people for it. A third woman, the oldest of the three, was silent for a long time. She was washing her grandson's cloth, moving slowly, her hands working with a kind of meditation in the water. When she finally spoke, her voice was different from the others. It was not gossip, it was knowledge. It was not the spirits, she said quietly. Not in the way you think. It was the old woman herself. There are some beings in this village, old beings, older than memory, older than the time when we came here, older than the time when our ancestors came here. These beings walk among us. They test us. They see who we are in the moments when we think no one is watching. The old woman in the market, she was one of these. She did not come to the market to beg for water. She came to ask for kindness. And when kindness was refused, when it was met with violence, the refusal created a consequence, not a punishment, a consequence. The way planting bitter seed creates bitter fruit. The other two women looked at the old woman. Neither of them spoke, but both of them understood that what she had said was a different kind of truth, a deeper truth, the kind of truth that did not feel like gossip, but like history being spoken. Kofi grew desperate. He had always been a man who solved problems with action. He was a trader. A problem was something you negotiated with, something you bought your way past, something you outsmarted. But this was a problem that his money could not touch. He left for the city, the real city, far from the village, many days' journey away. He had heard that in the city there lived a famous healer, a woman who was said to have studied with the greatest healers of the coast, who had medicines from lands across the sea, who could cure anything that could be cured. He took with him a leather pouch filled with silver. He was gone for 10 days, the longest 10 days of Nandi's life. When he returned, he brought medicines in glass bottles that glinted strangely in the light, as if they contained captured stars. The labels on the bottles were written in languages that were not the language of Nandi's people. Some of the medicines were colored, blue and green and red. Some were clear like water. Some were thick like blood. Nandi drank them. She bathed in them. She let them soak into her skin, while Kofi watched with desperate hope in his eyes. The first medicine made her stomach hurt. The second medicine made her vision blur. The third medicine made her sleep for a full day and night. She woke screaming from nightmares so vivid that she could not tell if she was awake or still dreaming. Nothing stopped the wood. The transformation had its own schedule. It followed its own timeline. It was not interested in Kofi's money or his desperation or his love for his wife. By the 7th day of the transformation, the wood had reached her neck. She could not turn her head. The wooden side had gone rigid. The muscles that controlled her movement had been replaced by something dead and unyielding. She could not raise her right arm. She could not feel anything on the right side of her body. If she looked to the right, she could see only if she moved her entire body. Her eye did not move in its socket. The eye itself was becoming wood. The line of demarcation had reached her jaw. The transformation was climbing up her face now, along the side of her neck, moving toward her mouth, toward her eye. In the mirror, the old spotted mirror that Kofi had placed in her room so she could see what was happening, as if seeing it would somehow help her understand it. She looked at her own face splitting in two. One side was the young woman Kofi had married. One side was something ancient and wooden and still. The wooden side of her face was perfect in its grain. If she had not known it was transforming, she might have thought it was beautiful. But she did know, and so it was only terrible. Kofi looked at his wife and wept. He could not help her. Nothing could. The healer Sibo had told him the truth. This was not medicine that was needed. This was something else. Something that lived in a realm where his money and his power could not reach. The village turned away, not all at once, but gradually, like turning a corner and discovering that the path behind you had disappeared. In markets, when Kofi's name was mentioned, women shook their heads. The gesture was small, but it was definitive. It meant, that one, that family, the marked ones. When Kofi's merchant friends saw him coming, they found reasons to be busy elsewhere. They looked at their cloth. They examined their goods. They counted their money. Anything to avoid meeting his eyes. A man who had married a woman who had committed an act of violence against someone sacred was a man tainted by association. He had married a woman the spirits had marked. Whatever he touched now might be marked as well. You must have known, mothers told their daughters, using Nandi's story as a teaching tool, a warning, a way to shape the behavior of the next generation. You must have seen the cruelty in her from the beginning. A person who can strike an old woman will strike anyone. There are signs. There are always signs. And if you marry a man who chooses such a woman, you marry her cruelty as well. It passes through families. It travels like disease. Kofi heard this. He began to believe it. Perhaps he should have seen Nandi's cruelty from the beginning. Perhaps there were signs. Perhaps the kindness he had felt from her in their first weeks of marriage had been a mask. Perhaps she had been waiting for the moment when she could remove it and show him her true nature. His eyes grew distant. His smile disappeared. He began to spend more time away from the compound. When he was home, he could not look at his wife, could not see her face split between human and wood, could not reconcile the woman he had married with the thing that was standing in his compound, unable to move, unable to feel, unable to be the wife he had chosen. One night, he came to her room. She was sitting by the window, looking out at the village. She could only look in one direction now, straight ahead or to the left. To the right, there was only stillness, only the frozen wooden side of her face, unable to move, unable to express, unable to feel. "I am leaving," he said. His voice was gentle, which made it worse. If he had shouted, if he had raged, she might have understood it better. Gentleness meant that he had already accepted her loss. He had already moved beyond her into a future in which she did not exist. "Where?" she asked. Her voice came from the human side of her mouth. The wooden side could not form words. "To the next village, to my brother. I cannot stay here. People will not trade with me. They think you have cursed me. Perhaps you have. Perhaps this is part of what you are." "I did not know," Nandi said. "I swear by the ancestors. I did not know what would happen." "I know," Kofi said. "That is what makes it worse. That you did not know. That you could strike an old woman without knowing. That there is something inside you that can act without thinking, without compassion, without any sense of what another person might need. I loved someone, but now I wonder if that person was ever real." He left in the morning. He took nothing that connected him to her. He left the cloth he had given her as marriage gifts. He left the silver. He left the compound to her. As if in leaving these things, he could leave her behind as well. Nandi lived in darkness now, the darkness of understanding what she had done. The wooden half of her face could not weep. The tears came only from the left side, falling in streams that left wet trails down her wooden right cheek. It was a horror unlike any she had known. To cry from only one eye while the other stared, unblinking, unable to feel, unable to respond to the grief that moved through her body. She was split, divided. Part of her was capable of suffering. Part of her was incapable of feeling anything at all. Days passed, or maybe they were weeks. Time became strange. The wooden side of her did not experience time the way the human side did. The human side marked the passage of time through hunger, through thirst, through the changing of light. The wooden side simply existed, unchanging, permanent. The healer Sabo came to the compound one morning. She did not know how many days had passed since she had last seen him, but he came. and he looked at her with an expression that combined pity and something else. Knowledge, recognition, the look of someone who has seen this before. He examined her face carefully. He ran his wooden fingers, old fingers, weathered by time and use, along the line where her skin transitioned to wood. He felt the grain of it. He touched the eye that no longer moved. He looked into the pupil that no longer adjusted to light. "It has stopped," he said finally. "The transformation. It will not go further than it has. The wood has reached its destination." Relief flooded through her, so intense that for a moment she could not breathe. It was over. The horror was over. It would not consume her. It would not turn her entirely to wood. But Sibo raised his hand, a gesture that seemed to say, "Do not celebrate yet. That is not mercy," he said. "That is lesson. The wood has stopped because it has reached what it came to teach. Your right eye does not see because it will not see what you did. Your right hand is gone because it struck. Your right side is frozen because you refuse to move toward the old woman, to help her, to touch her with anything but violence." He sat before her on a stool that seemed to appear from nowhere, as if he had simply manifested it through will alone. "Do you understand what happened?" Sibo asked. Nandi's voice came from the human side of her mouth. The wooden side was silent, would always be silent. "I struck an old woman. She was in my way. I thought I was better than her. I thought my husband's money had made me important. I thought I could treat her as if she was nothing." "Yes," Sibo said, "but there is something else you do not yet see, something you will not understand until you are ready to see it." He stood and walked to the corner of the hut. He returned with a mirror, an old mirror, cracked and spotted with age, but still capable of reflecting. He held it so she could see herself. Nandi looked, and there, in the glass, she saw something that made her breath stop. The wooden side of her face was not ugly. It was not a curse that made her look monstrous. It was beautiful. The grain of the wood was intricate, patterns within patterns, like rivers flowing, like wind patterns in sand. The color was warm, the color of earth and fire and ancient things. There was something in it, a kind of permanence, a kind of strength, a kind of truth that made the human side of her face look fragile by comparison. The two halves together made one complete face, one true face, as if the wood was not taking from her, but completing her, as if it was showing her something about herself that she had never known before. "The spirits did not punish you," Sibo said. "The spirits revealed you. The woman you struck, the blind old woman, she was what we call a walker between worlds. She is older than this village, older than the lands around it, older than the trees that stand at the edges of the forest. She does not move through the market asking for water because she needs water. She moves through the hearts of people asking for kindness. And when that kindness is refused with violence, the refusal creates a consequence. Not a punishment, daughter. A consequence. The way planting bitter seed creates bitter fruit. The way cruelty in the world creates more cruelty. The way one act of violence ripples outward like a stone dropped in still water. Can it be undone? Nandi whispered. It can, Sibo said, but not by medicine, not by herbs or magic of the healer kind, not by any substance that can be taken internally or applied to the skin. It can only be undone by a choice, the same kind of choice you made when you raised your hand. A choice, a true one, a choice that costs you something, a choice where there is no path back to how things were before. When you understand what that choice must be, the wood will know it, the spirits will know it, and then perhaps transformation will follow. He left her with the mirror. Nandi could not stay in the compound. She could not stay in the village. The looks of the women at the market had become unbearable. The whispers, the way they pulled their daughters away as she passed, the way even children were taught to point. There is the woman who struck the old one, mothers said, their voices turning the words into curse and warning combined. There is the woman the spirits marked. Do not touch her. Do not speak to her. Do not let her shadow fall on you. She understood now what Kofi had felt. She understood the contagion of shame. She understood how being marked by the spirits made everyone around you marked as well. How people feared that what had touched her might touch them. How the fear was stronger than any compassion. One night, under a moon that was swollen and yellow, she told the old woman who had come to help her with daily tasks that she was leaving. The old woman was named Amara, and she had been kind in a way that seemed to cost her nothing, or perhaps cost her everything. Nandi did not know which. "Where will you go?" Amara asked. She was packing Nandi's few possessions into a cloth bundle. "To the forest, to the river, away from here, anywhere that is not this village, anywhere that is not a reminder of who I was and what I did." "The river that runs through the forest?" Amara's voice was careful. "That is a long way. That is a way with no return." "Yes," Nandi said. "I think that is what I need." She did not take much. She could not carry much. She packed a wrapper that was plain, undyed cloth. She packed a calabash for water. She packed a small knife. She did not take the silver her husband had left. She did not take the beautiful cloth of her marriage. She did not take anything that connected her to who she had been. She walked out of the compound as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red and gold. Behind her, the village continued. The market would open in the morning. The women would gather at the river. The children would run and play. The elders would sit under the great tree. The world would continue, unchanged, as if she had never been part of it. She walked to the river that ran through the forest, the river that ran fast and cold and deep. This was where the old woman had fallen when pushed. This was where the water gathered in pools. This was where the earth grew soft. This was the place where things were born and things died and things transformed. For 3 days, she stayed at the river. She built a small shelter from branches and leaves and cloth. She did not eat. She could not eat. Her stomach felt as wooden as her hand, incapable of hunger. She did not sleep. She sat by the water and looked at her reflection, at the half-wood, half-human face, at the arm that moved like a tree branch, stiff and slow, at the woman she had become, at the stranger looking back at her. On the 3rd night, as the moon was rising, something happened. The old woman appeared on the opposite bank, blind as always, trembling, but there, visible in the moonlight. Real, present, not a ghost, not a spirit, a woman made of flesh and bone standing at the river's edge. Nandi's heart stopped. She could not move. She could not speak. She could only stare. "You have made a choice," the old woman said. It was not really a question. Her voice was softer than it had been in the market. Or perhaps Nandi had been too angry then to hear its true nature. "I have chosen to leave," Nandi said. "To leave my husband, to leave my home, to leave my place in the village. I have chosen the shame of being marked rather than the shame of pretending I am not guilty. I have chosen to accept what I am rather than deny it." The old woman nodded very slowly. She began to walk toward the river, toward the water that separated them. "That is not all," the old woman continued. She was walking into the water. She did not look at where she was walking. She simply walked as if she knew the path, as if the path had been known to her since before time began. "You have something else to choose, something harder than leaving, something harder than shame." She raised her hand, the hand Nandi had struck. It was whole. It was kind. It was a hand that had known many years of kindness, many years of giving to others, many years of asking for nothing. "You have chosen to see yourself truly," the old woman said. The water was now at her waist. It did not seem to bother her. It did not seem to cold her. It seemed to be welcoming her the way a mother welcomes her child, not as better, not as less, but as yourself, flawed, cruel, capable of striking, and yet capable of change, capable of loss, capable of choosing what is right over what is easy, capable of choosing to love the person you hurt by accepting the consequences of your own action. The old woman walked deeper into the water. She was up to her neck now. The current was strong here. Nandi could see it pulling at the woman's wrapper, at her hair. "The wood will leave you," the old woman said. Her voice was becoming distant, not because she was moving away, but because she was moving into something else, into some realm where Nandi could hear her, but not fully reach her, but not in the way you hope. It will not disappear. It will remain, so you can remember, so you can carry it with you always, so that every time you look in a mirror, you will see what you have learned. But it will no longer be spreading. It will no longer be taking. It will be part of you, held in balance with the rest of what you are. You will be whole, but not in the way you were before. You will be marked, but not in shame, in knowledge. The old woman stepped deeper into the river. Her head went under the surface, but she did not thrash. She did not struggle. She simply floated down and away, down the current, until she was gone. Whether she rose on the other side, whether she emerged downstream, Whether she transformed into something else entirely, Nandi did not know. She only knew that the old woman was gone and that her words remained. Nandi looked at her arm. In the moonlight, she could see the grain of the wood shimmering, and she felt something shift inside her. The wood was stopping, not disappearing, but stopping. The transformation had reached its destination. It would remain with her always, a visible marker of what she had learned, a visible reminder of what she had done, a visible symbol of the choice to live with consequence rather than flee from it. She stood and walked back to the village, not to Kofi, not to her old life, not to the compound or the market or the women who whispered, but to a small dwelling at the river's edge, just beyond the village boundary. There she built a home with her own hands. The wooden hand moved in ways that were slower, that had to be learned new. The human hand remembered movements it had forgotten years ago. Together, they worked. Together, they built. It took her many days, but slowly, a small dwelling took shape. A place to sleep, a place to be. Women came to her. At first, they came out of curiosity. They wanted to see the woman marked by the spirits. They wanted to look at the wooden side of her face and feel grateful that it was not them, that they had not struck an old woman, that they had not been revealed in their cruelty. But something happened as they spent time with her. They began to speak of their own cruelties, their own moments of hardness, the times they had hurt someone and moved on, pretending it had not happened, the times they had refused kindness when kindness was asked, the times they had looked away. Nandi listened. She listened with the attention of someone who had no choice but to listen, whose own failure had taught her that listening was important. She listened with the half of her that was human. The wooden half simply was, present, unchanging, a constant reminder of what happens when we do not listen, when we do not see, when we do not offer what is asked of us. Some women came back, not once, but many times. They brought their daughters, they brought their difficulties, they brought their need to be heard, and Nandi heard them, not with advice, not with medicine, but with the simple gift of presence, of a person who had fallen as far as a person could fall and had chosen to remain present in that fallen state, rather than climb back up and pretend the fall had never happened. Mothers brought their daughters and pointed at Nandi's wooden side. "This is what happens when you strike an old woman," they said. But the daughters saw something else. They saw a woman who had been marked by the spirits and had not been destroyed by it, who had chosen truth over comfort, who lived now by the river, helping people, asking for nothing, offering presence. The daughters saw transformation, not punishment. The elders gathered one evening and spoke of her. They gathered under the great tree, as they always did when something important needed to be discussed, when something needed to be understood at a deep level, when the truth needed to be separated from the story. "There was a woman," the oldest one said, his voice like wind through dry leaves. "There was a woman who learned that the river takes what it must, and sometimes what it takes makes us whole. Not whole in the way we expect, not whole in the way we want, but whole in the way we need to be. The spirits do not forget cruelty, but they do offer mercy if we are brave enough to accept it, if we are brave enough to live with the consequence of our action rather than run from it." The other elders nodded. They understood. And so the story spread through the village like seeds on the wind. A story of a woman who struck the blind in the market. A story of a hand turned to wood. A story that was not a warning of punishment, but a lesson of transformation. A story that showed that even when we are marked by our own cruelty, we can choose to become something stronger, something that serves, something that remembers. Years later, when young women came of age, when they needed to understand what it meant to be a woman in the world, old women would sit with them at the river and speak of Nandi. They would speak of how she had learned what cannot be unlearned, but can be lived with. How she had learned that the spirits do not seek to destroy us, but to teach us who we truly are. How the woman called a fool by the village, the woman marked with shame, became in the end the one who listened, the one who healed, the one who understood that some gifts come carved in wood, and their value is all the greater because we have earned it through suffering. "What you plant," they would say, "you will harvest." And she had planted cruelty. But in harvesting that crop, in looking at what she had grown, she had learned to plant something else, something that grew more slowly, something that lasted longer, something that changed the color of the earth around it, that made the earth richer, darker, deeper. The river, they said, collects its debts, but it also teaches kindness to those brave enough to sit on its banks and listen. And Nandi, they said, had learned to listen at last, and in listening, she had become more than she had been. Not in spite of the wood, but because of it. The wood was not a punishment, it was a teacher, and she had finally understood its lesson.